about Europeans? What do you see as some of the, quite typical cultural stumbling blocks that they could have in working with colleagues in Latin America?
I have, according to my experience, I have worked with many Europeans and U.S. Americans coming to Latin America, and I can define 4 cultural stumbling blocks that I've seen that are more common when Europeans come into Latin America to do business. The first one, which is one of the most common cultural stumbling blocks, is the oversizing of the similarities. What does it mean? Basically, it means that they believe that Latin America constitutes one single and unique culture. So in a way, when they're expecting the similarities, they don't make any differentiation if they're interacting or working with Argentinians or with Colombians or with Brazilians or with Mexicans, when in actually it is a huge difference, and of course you need to adapt in a different way depending with who you are interacting with. So when you're expecting similarities, it might be kind of a rare, because whenever you're going to start facing differences, you're not going to be able to perceive them. So the first thing that I usually recommend to Europeans coming to Latin America is to break the stereotype of thinking that this is one single culture and we are all the same, and there are not going to be differences between us. And of course, we will be able to find some similarities between the different countries, but also you can expect a lot of differences. In the second place, something that is quite common and I have perceived in many Europeans coming to Latin America, especially those Europeans coming from developed countries, is this feeling of condescension. What does it mean? It means that in this sense that we know more than you know. You have to learn from us. Or please see and learn how things work from here. I know that many of you probably don't have these feelings consciously, but I have perceived in many Europeans coming to Latin America this sense of superiority. Yeah. And of course, when you start dealing with Latin America and you have that perception, even though it doesn't show obviously, the first reaction of Latin American will be of resistance, of little collaboration. So it's very important to have a more empathetic point of view when dealing with Latin America. The third cultural stumbling blocks are stereotypes. And this is not to blame to people, but the media has a role in it, Hollywood has a role in it, because they have portrayed an image of Latinos that many people start believing that is actually true. For example, that Latinos are lazy people, there are people that you cannot trust, and that every time a Latino has the chance, they will be willing to cheat you. So this is far from being true. Even though that you might find some Latinos that are like that, it's not the majority, and most probably the people that you are going to be working with, it's not going to be this case. Of course, you need to know how to build trust with Latin American people, but be careful of your own stereotypes, because it's very important if you're planning to develop a good and productive working relationship to break the stereotypes and start understanding people. And last but not least is language. Especially when you're start interacting with different countries that speak Spanish, you will start believing that Spanish is exactly the same in any Latin American country. When this is not the case, because the Spanish from Argentina is quite different from the Spanish from Mexico or from Spain. Even though we can understand each other, how we speak, slangs, different expressions, or what to say and when to say it is different depending on the country you are interacting with. So you need to be careful with, especially if you start speaking Spanish or if you manage to learn Spanish, because you will have different challenges with your Spanish depending on the country you are interacting with.
Interesting. Okay. So that's quite challenging, really, for people who may come from Spain or perhaps come from Italy, who may have, reasonable intermediate Spanish. They may find themselves finding difficulty moving from one South American country to another, right?
Yeah, that's true, David. It is a challenge, but if you are aware of that, you can start taking some precautions. like putting the thing in the topic, start discussing about that beforehand, and trying to understand what words might have a different meaning in different countries, in order to avoid some misunderstanding or some clashes that, well, I have many examples of, even between Latin American countries, that they start having problems because they believe that what they say, it was clear for the other people, but actually they understood something else. Words, for example, that in Mexico use a lot, for example, ahorita, while in Argentina, it doesn't have any meaning because we don't use it. So Argentinians get very confused about what's the real meaning of that word when they're talking. And it's very common from Mexico. And even from Mexico's, they don't really what it means because they usually so normally that it's difficult for them to, well, how would you describe that word? Well, it's different and it's special. It has a meaning in a particular context. And of course, I mean, the region, Latin America is a huge region. We're talking about 3 or 4 euros. So you can expect a lot of differences between the different countries.
What distinguishes Argentina from some of the other neighboring countries in Latin America? And one or two of the historical events that have kind of created the Argentinian psyche or mindset?
When we're talking about Argentina, this is one critical sentence that describes a lot about Argentina. It is said that Argentina is the Europe of Latin America. Why so? Because the immigration process that occurred in the history of the country was, it has no comparison in any other countries of Latin America. So when we're talking about 1 century ago, the immigration process that started because Argentina was a barely populated country, and the governors of those times wanted to populate the country, and they thought, okay, which people do we need in order to populate the country, because we don't want to include the people that are actually living there, the natives of the Argentinian lands. So what they did was to open the immigration process for Europeans. And it's funny because the governments of those times, they actually wanted Europeans from Northern Europe. They wanted people from Germany, from Denmark, from Sweden, and so on. But at the end, after 100 years of immigration process, 51% of the immigrants that arrived to Argentina were Italians, especially from the north, but also from the south of Italy. For example, in my case, I have Italian descendancy. My surname is Italian. I'm Baudino, coming from the Piemontese area in Italy. So that changed a lot the thinking and the belief for the Argentinian culture, because many Argentinians don't consider themselves to be Latins. Actually, it's make a clash. I mean, it's funny for us to consider ourselves Latins. We actually were thinking and looking in the old good times of Europe, and we have Italy or Spain as a reference, as a model for us, which in a way is a challenge for Argentina, because many Latin America don't consider Argentina as Latin as well. So in a way, we are in the middle. We are not Latin America, but we are not European at the same time. So whenever you come to Argentina to do business, you will see that Argentina is kind of the perfect transition between Europe and the rest of Latin America, because we have maintained certain traits, certain European traits, since our gastronomy, but also in our communication style, in the way we approach business, in the perhaps the informality on our relationships, and we also have a more egalitarian perspective in terms of communicating with the bosses or with the people with a more higher hierarchy than others.